The Cairngorms National Park is the biggest in the UK and is amazing for wild plants. It has over 1,900 species across diverse habitats, from the Caledonian pine woods to the tundra-like plateaus. Thousands of people flock here looking for adventure in this spectacular, massive landscape. There are also much smaller things living here that make this place so unique. The Cairngorms are home to some of our rarest and most threatened wild plants, which are perfectly adapted to this sometimes hostile environment. Even in this remote wilderness, their survival is uncertain and they need our help. This summer, Plant Life take a journey through this magical landscape to see some of Britain's rarest wild plants. And we will see how Plant Life's Cairngorms Wild Plants project is bringing together landowners, locals, mountain guides, and simply people with a passion for wild plants so that they can save the jewels in the Cairngorms crown. The Cairngorms is made up of a rich tapestry of habitats, forests, wetlands, and of course, breathtaking high mountains. But it's within the Caledonian pine woods that our journey starts. Plant Life have been carrying out major work here to save one of Scotland's iconic species, the twinflower. So here we are in the Caledonian pine forest, which is a really magical place and a really rare habitat now. Caledonian pine forests used to be widespread across the Scottish Highlands, but they've become really fragmented, and with that fragmentation we've also started to see the plant populations that are associated with these habitats become fragmented and rare as well. One of these plants is the amazing, charismatic and beautiful twinflower, which can be found here and very few other places. It's an incredibly rare plant and it's become so fragmented that the distances between the patches are too great for pollinators to fly, which is threatening its long-term survival. To ensure the twinflower and other species survive, Plant Life need to understand how they are faring, and that's why they have trained people to become flora guardians.
The Cairngorms is a really large place, and the habitats and the rare plants that we have they're spread over quite a large area. Land managers, Plant Life, we're all struggling to try and have the resources to go out and find out about what's happening. And this is where Flora Guardians have a vital role to play. If they live close to some of these sites, they can help keep an eye on some of our wild plants and let us know how they're getting on.
This Plant Life project is really important for me because it goes out and it looks at what's actually happening in the countryside to some of our rare plants. And the other reason why I think it's really important is because it's involving local people going out and looking at what's happening in their own backyard. And people really enjoy doing that. I know that I certainly do. And then all that information can go back to Plant Life. So it helps all of us know more about what's happening to these rare species throughout the national park.
So, whilst Anne is all eyes for twinflower, there are other treasures hidden in the forest that need TLC, such as one-flowered wintergreen, juniper, and creeping ladies' tresses. Habitat fragmentation and overgrazing are both also contributing to the decline of these species. To secure the future of all these rarities, Plant Life's project also involves working with landowners. Across Scotland, only a very small percentage of the important habitats that we want to conserve are actually owned or managed by nature conservation organisations. So it's really important for Plant Life to engage with other landowners. That's why we're here today with Andy Ford, who works for the Cairngorms National Park Authority as Head of Conservation and is also one of the directors of the Annagach Woods Trust. And it's the Annagach Woods that we're in today, talking about how different land management techniques can be brought in to really enhance the populations of rare plants that are found here.
The great thing about the Wild Plants Project is that, as well as that advice to us in terms of what habitat management we can be doing, they've provided the resource which has come in and told us exactly how much we've got, where it is, what condition it's in. Finally, but perhaps most importantly in a community woodland, they've really helped us raise the profile of these plants. 99.9% of the people who walk through these woodlands wouldn't know that they're walking past one of the most important patches of rare plants in the whole of Scotland, and the Wild Plants Project has brought that to life. So what next? Well, one thing we'd like to do, we know that the twin flower in particular, we used to have more of it than we have now. The populations are decreasing, so we know that we need to introduce new material to give them a kickstart. This isn't about planting up the whole of the woodlands with twin flower. This is about introducing small bits of material to the existing clones which are not doing very well, to give them a boost, and hopefully we'll start seeing twin flower back into Anagach like it would have been here millennia ago.
But over a millennia ago, our ancestors in the Cairngorms would have had their own name for a twin flower, as Gaelic was their common tongue. Today the Gaelic names for plants have died with our ancestors, been forgotten through lack of use, or simply ignored. But Sarah and Seamus are determined to bring back the Gaelic names for plants and trees.
So what is Scots pine in Gaelic?
Gewis.
Gewis. Yeah. So what I was really interested in as part of the Cairngorms Wild Plants project was to find if there were any local forms of Gaelic words left for the plants and the trees and the flora around, this specific place.
So
little mushroom here.
So it's a Balak and Buach. Balak and Buach.
Yeah.
And Gaelic is not just a language, but it's another way of looking at the world. It's a whole culture, another way of looking at the world. The attachment to the land, and the old people just knew every inch of their home and environment. That's Frugh. Frugh is heather.
We've now got a short list, but it is a list of words that were spoken in Bainoch and Strathspey.
Curach Cuek, which is Curach Cuek, cuckoo's cap.
Yeah, so in terms of building that connection, personally, I think language is quite important about that, because when something has a name, you can recognise it, you can understand it, you can learn about it, you can care for it. And once that happens, you can, then there is a relationship to be had there. So that's personally why I think the names and the words that we have for things are so dreadfully important. Because I think Brognacuig is also.
There's also Brognacuig as well. Yes, it varies from place to place.
Yeah.
As we leave the Caledonian pine woods behind, it's the perfect chance to join a mountain leader who's been taking part in Plant Life's project to understand more about the wild plants of the Cairngorms and how to interpret them to clients.
I'm a volunteer with the Cairngorm National Park Authority, and for the last 15 years I've been involved in a local scout group in Aviemore. The Plant Life resources that we've been provided has really helped us appreciate the environment. Most of our scouting activities happen in this great outdoor environment we've got, and rather than now just passing by the small flowers, the twin flowers, whatever it may be in the woods, we're now stopping, looking at it and really identifying with it and seeing and understanding why it's there and just how fragile it is, and the impact of things like climate change is going to have on this environment that we're playing in.
So we've left the forest behind, we're heading for the high tops, but as we do that, as quite often happens in Scottish mountains, we find ourselves in this boggy environment. There's a whole load of stuff going on here, so just in terms of the species and the things that we can see, we've got a whole range of mosses called sphagnum mosses, which suck up huge amounts of water and really almost create this entire habitat. We've got fantastic things like bog asphodel, we've got cross-leaved heath, and a whole diversity of plants which make this peat bog habitat so special. But it's not just the plants and the diversity of plants that make peat bogs so important, it's also what bogs do for us. They're really, really important in the fight against climate change for two main reasons. One is that they lock up carbon, they absorb carbon from the atmosphere and lock it up, and a peat bog which is in good condition can lock up huge amounts of carbon indefinitely, which means that we take it out of the atmosphere and it doesn't contribute to climate change. The other big thing which peat bogs do is absorb huge amounts of water and really slow the flow of water down, which stops the water hammering off the hill and flooding towns, villages, cities further down the hillside. So they do a huge amount for us, as well as being fantastic places for plant diversity. So we've left the Caledonian pine forest behind, but we're up here in this environment with stunted pines that have been blasted by the wind. This is a really rare habitat that we've lost across a huge amount of Scotland, but here in the Cairngorms, landowners and land managers are working together to try and reduce herbivore impacts and browsing pressure, which is enabling these plants and these trees to self-seed up the mountain to give us a natural tree line. We've got about another 500 feet of climbing to go, so we're going to go and see what else we can find. So we're even higher up the mountain here, and it's starting to get really exposed and really windy, and the plants that we can find up here have adapted to these extreme conditions. We've got things like trailing azalea, we've got things like bearberry, and they really hug the ground to try and make the most of the protection which they can get at very low levels. They've got really strong root systems, and they're trying to protect themselves from the extreme winds and the extreme snow which come battering across here in the winter. We're getting on well on our climb up the mountain now, and we found ourselves in probably one of the most magical and beautiful places in the mountains. This is a spring flush where water comes out of the mountain itself and creates this rare habitat full of diversity. We can see starry saxifrage, we can see fountain moss, and lots of other really rare mosses and liverworts. This is probably one of the most fragile habitats in the Cairngorms. It can be destroyed by development, and it can also be destroyed by pollution. It seems as if we're miles and miles away from any sources of pollution, but it can get into the atmosphere, it can rain down on the mountains, and nitrogen in the rain can have a devastating effect on habitats such as these. So we need to work hard to make sure that we protect these habitats for the future. So now we are over 3,000 feet above sea level, and we're really up in the mountains now. You can see behind me the northern Quarries of the Cairngorms, which is one of the most important features of the Cairngorms. We've got these scree slopes, we've got the buttresses, and we've got the rock, and then beyond the Quarries, the plateau, the Cairngorm Plateau starts, which is a vast expanse of almost Arctic-like wilderness. And these habitats are really, really important for a whole range and diversity of plants. And it's here in these high northern Quarries on the Cairngorms that we can really start to see the impacts of climate change. The snow lies in these northern Quarries for a long time into the summer, which creates this unique microclimate that the plants have evolved to take advantage of. But as we lose that long-lying snow, then we lose these habitats and we lose the fragile plants because they've got nowhere else to go. Warmer climate on the peaks mean commoner, more thuggish plants are able to move up the mountain and smother other rare, fragile plants that don't stand a chance of competing. Precious rarities are literally pushed out of the landscape as they are so near the top of the mountain they have nowhere else to go, and so we lose them completely. A real impact of climate change here and now in the Cairngorms. The highest part of the Cairngorms is the Cairngorm Plateau, which is around 4,000 feet above sea level and is an Arctic-like environment. There are plants which live here that live nowhere else in Britain. Our journey through the Cairngorms this summer has shown firsthand the difference Plant Life's Cairngorms Wild Plants project is making to twinflower, one-flowered wintergreen and a whole host of other rare species. But it's also shown us the threats that these species are facing. In a vast wilderness, small things can go unnoticed, but it's these small things that make the Cairngorms so special. Plant Life's work to save these botanical treasures will continue, but without the support of landowners, volunteers, funders and our members, this work would simply not be possible.